Hello, everybody, all our listeners, educators, students, people around the world who are interested in education globally. This is our EDU Unlocked podcast with me, Ashish Fernando, your host. And joining me today is just another amazing guest that we've added to our portfolio on the podcast is Martin Betts from Brisbane, Australia. Hello, Martin, and welcome.
Hello, Ashish, and thank you for welcoming me. And g'day, I should say, to all of your guests from Brisbane, Australia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to start with a quick introduction. Martin, you've done a lot, so I'm going to definitely miss a few things when I talk about you and your bio. But most prominent and current in your life and career is HEDx, which is your global content and advisory services solution. You also do a lot of conferencing and you bring educationalist leaders in education close through HEDx. And I really like what your one-liner on LinkedIn says. It kind of summarizes how you think and what you want to do is changing higher education for good. Love it. Very simple and would love to talk about it a little bit. Martin's also he's been a leader in higher ed. He's written a couple of books with some prominent leaders. We want to talk about that. But most importantly, I feel, Martin, you bring in a sort of a combination of education insights and also just personalization. And that's what our podcast is about. Like on your profile or when I read your bio, I always see that you've always talked about your life a little bit and what you've learned from your father and how those things have inspired you. So I'm really inspired by that. Would love to talk about it. In the past, you worked for a university as well, right? You've been a professor, you've been a chancellor, you worked in student engagement. So you know this industry in and out, probably for the last, what, 35 years?
Yeah, well, I worked it out that when I stepped down from being a deputy vice chancellor of engagement at Griffith University in Australia, I'd been immersed in universities in one way or another, in one guise or another, for 38 years, and that was at 7 universities in 3 continents, in Southeast Asia, in the UK and Australia. And as some of my members of my family always said to me, they said, when are you going to leave school and get a proper job? And it took me a while, but I really do feel that I've found my calling quite late in my career. And now I'm really excited about bringing all of that experience of working in different roles in global universities with my thirst and passion that comes from my personal story and purpose, with a real appetite for technology and new ideas and innovation to bring about change that lives up to that strapline that you've identified in my LinkedIn profile.
I mean, it just tells so much about a person, right? Like I love it. And yeah, that's the first thing that pops about you. And I want to know more, but tell us about the backstory. Tell us why education.
Well, there's a long backstory, but I'll try and keep it short and sweet for the benefit of this podcast and your listeners. But I mean, the backstory is that I come from a family that had very interesting backgrounds, born in the UK and grew up living on a fire station, of all things, because my dad was a fireman. He went on to be the station officer of a fire station in Essex in England. And I lived in a house right next to the fire station. I took all my inspiration by looking over the garden fence at my dad and his colleagues practicing to be firemen. All of my neighbours and schoolmates were families of firemen. It took me a long time to realise that there were people out there in the world that weren't firemen, and fire women now, of course.
Women also, yeah. And you probably
Yeah.
never had 8 hours of continuous sleep.
Well, we had an old and now disused bell in our house, which used to summon firemen to rush over to the station and get on an engine. But we also had a constant stream of still used fire engines leaving the station with their claxons blazing and rushing to act quickly to solve problems. And that's the lesson that I took from that, really. And it got combined with that admiration of my father in his role with taking action quickly to solve problems, with a sense that I only developed later in life, and I regret that, of how important the role of my mother was in providing a nurturing environment for all of the family, and the misfortune that my sister suffered. I had one sibling. It was my sister. She was older. She passed away about 10 years ago. And she was not as fortunate as me in getting the advantages of education that seemed to fall in my lap by virtue of, I think, the advantage that I had at the time of being male. I also grew up in a system that streamed people at a very early age of 11 to be either destined for university or destined for other vocations in life. And I am so grateful for what university and higher education has done for me in terms of learning and job opportunities. And I'm so disappointed in the fact that others, like my sister, have not had that opportunity in the world. And having now come out of working and serving universities in 3 continents in different parts of the world for 38 years, I'm now feeling I want to give back. I want to try and help people like my sister get those opportunities. And I'm going to do it like my dad did, by taking action quickly, and like my mother did in nurturing others to succeed.
Powerful, powerful. And your parents, what was their education like? You talked about your dad's career a little bit.
Yeah, my dad passed away earlier this year at the age of 91. He lived a great life and was really well organised. I'd never realised he was a writer until I started to reflect on it looking back, because my image of him is in a fire tunic running up a ladder with a hose or a person over his shoulder. But he used to write little odes to himself, odes to the family, little poems for family occasions. A real showman and a real events person. But what I learned on his death is that he'd written his own eulogy. He'd written what he wanted the world to know about his life for someone else to read. I had the great privilege of reading that, and he started it by reflecting on how he himself had gone to a high school in his early childhood because he'd been bright as a young kid, but for whatever reason, he hadn't pursued that line of work. He'd pursued public service in a quite different way. I think I'm sure we'll go on to say how important technology is to ensure people take advantage of opportunities, but I also think great people and individuals that you might encounter in life can also inspire you along the way. And I was lucky to have them. Maybe my mum and my dad and my sister didn't have such fortune in that regard.
Wow. I share a common theme there. So like you lived at a fire station. I actually lived inside a school campus. Because my grandfather was invited by the then bishop of my district in Pune. I was raised Catholic. And he was invited to help start schools. Brilliant man, all about education and serving. And so my siblings, my cousins, my parents, their cousins, siblings, everybody went to these schools that my grandfather started.
Wow.
And the impact that your previous generation and your previous life creates into like in your life, I see that too. I mean, I'm in education because it's in my blood. My father and mother were not in education. They were doing public service and other things, but just living in that environment is what got me into education in the first place. So I can resonate with how the fire station and your father and things around that have applied to you. And that's great. And then you went on to do your bachelor's of science in quantity surveying.
Ah, gosh, you found that bit on the LinkedIn, eh? Well, yeah, I did undergraduate study in a specialism for the construction project management sector of quantity surveying, and found myself pursuing a professional career through that degree that had attracted me at the time of enrolment and admissions. Quite a strange process, actually. Being very easily led and lazy at the age of 17. I went to a school hall careers evening that was full of lots of different professions and lots of people queuing up in long lines to take advice from accountants and lawyers and engineers. And the quantity surveyor desk had no one in front of it. So because I could get to the front of it very quickly, I went and listened to what that person had to say. Felt that was sounded interesting enough and applied for a course in that there and then. But I soon found that actually practicing in that profession wasn't for me. I was intrigued by teaching others and learning more and researching aspects of the complexity of projects and how to make projects work more effectively. And so I spent a full 6 weeks working as a trainee quantity surveyor and 38 years working as an academic leader and academic administrator. Found my calling not on my original path, inspired by what occurred to me as being the challenges of life along the way.
Fantastic. Would you say, and this is a question a lot of leaders today think about, right? When I bring them together, they're always talking about it, is traditional education leading to the career path that you need. A lot of students, a lot of parents today are thinking differently about getting to the promised career path. It doesn't have to be traditional education. A lot of them are looking at online education and other means and ways of doing that. And I always tell them, like, I did a bachelor's in biotech and a master's in biotech, but I do nothing biotech today. But those 5 years actually taught me how to learn. And I feel like being at an institution and just learning how to learn is what makes me successful. Like if I had done the same thing on an online course or whatever, I don't think I would be thinking and learning the same way. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, considering, what you studied and you're also kind of doing different things. And yeah, what would be your thoughts for?
Yeah, I think this is a really complex subject and nuanced subject, and I've spent a lot of time thinking of it in the last 3 years in developing HEDx as a thought leadership activity and reflecting back on all those years in university. I mean, there wasn't online education in 1972 when I went away to college for university study. There wasn't that option. There were correspondence courses. The Open University started to develop in the UK not long after that. But I had the luxury of going away for 3 years immersion in a campus environment with new friends and new emerging leaders from all over the world, and had that great immersive experience. I did so at a time when not only was it not expensive to do so, I was given a grant, I was given money, I was paid to go and be a student on means-tested grounds in an era when that was still the case. My family was of modest means, and if I hadn't have had those grants and that opportunity, I would have never have gone to university at that time, for sure. And I think the way that the world has changed since, that higher education is so expensive, education debt is so cumbersome on so many people in so many parts of the world. I know here for you in the US, the $1.1 trillion of debt and steps towards debt forgiveness and the complexities of that are evidence that it's hugely expensive. And because of that, it attracts and is more easy to participate in with those that already have the means, and not for those that are from low SES groups and groups that don't have the money. So on the one hand, yes, I can see how lucky it is and how lucky I was to be able to have the opportunity to gain that transformative experience. I don't think that's the reality for the world in the 10 years that we have in front of us. I think there will always be people going away and having the extra benefit of a fully immersive campus experience in the world's universities. But the vast majority of our future learners won't be able to afford to do that. They don't experience other services like entertainment and knowledge acquisition and transport and mobility and recreation in a way that doesn't use technology. And I think increasingly the lucky campus immersion chosen few, if you like, will be complemented by an increasing number of people that use technology to do that. The second aspect of what you described there, though, Ashish, is the idea that we go away and study something and have a great experience and then are set up for doing whatever it is, whether we've chosen to carry on as a quantity surveyor or work in biotechnology, or chosen to use our learning about learning and then can use it for the rest of our careers. I think that model's broken. I think the idea that either our ability to learn how to learn or the knowledge that we've gained will be capped off as a 22-year-old and not needing to be replenished or rejuvenated or reinvigorated in some way in the years that follow is completely banished from the way that the world works, the world of work applies, and the world of learning is applying. I mean, we only need to look at AI now to learn, I think, that we need to rethink and relearn how to learn in an AI world. So I'm a big fan of lifelong learning. I'm a big fan of the need for us to look beyond universities being places that 17, 18-year-olds need to be attracted to. Because I think the bigger challenges of the future will be how we use technology and how we use whatever our offering is to attract lifelong learners without means back into learning how to learn for the future and gaining knowledge and skills for challenges that they aren't even aware of yet.
I think this will be a good segue because you also touched upon AI and what it's doing to the world. And you were at the GSV conference. You probably were bored with 80% of the sessions being all about AI. But I think we all talk about it, but I think we're all just scratching the surface. None of us fully get it and the impact it's going to have. Within education, what do you think it's gonna do in terms of what people are learning, how much of it are they gonna learn, and how it's gonna impact them? As for instance, a computer science student soon may not even have to learn how to code because AI does a lot of it. A graphic designer soon doesn't even have to learn how to use a brush or how to do something on Photoshop because there's an AI that's making all of those images and designs. So how do you think that will impact our ability to learn and to implement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a great believer in my leadership development over the years. To start off with, I was fooled into thinking that to be a professional and to be a leader meant that you needed to have answers to questions. And that you needed to be, and I think much of my formative educational experience, I was tested and assessed on whether I could answer questions. And I think what I learned as I progressed through a profession in academia in particular, and leadership in universities in particular, is that being able to tell other people the answers to questions serves you well up to a point and starts to become counterproductive if it stops other people asking questions of and showing their knowledge of their own. And that's really what you want to unleash. And after a while, I realized that the greater strength and the greater skill and the greater power, if you like, was the ability to ask questions of others to allow them to flourish and to learn and to develop their knowledge. And I think an AI world is fascinating for us in that regard because we've got a bit of a crisis going on in universities at the moment where I think that's a real challenge for the way that universities are working at the moment and the crisis that's going on in academic integrity with artificial intelligence in the world's universities. In that the model that we've had of asking our students questions for them to give answers that we can assess is open to the challenge of those answers not being authentically provided by students. If instead we move our paradigm to a more Socratic model of assessing people's ability to ask questions of their own, we then start to help people learn the skills that will be relevant to a prompt engineering AI world. And I think the skills that people need in the future are not to have the knowledge to answer other people's questions, but to ask themselves, systems, and other people questions that will help them uncover productivity to serve in a whole range of different life skills and work situations of the future.
Love it. And I think I fully agree with you. I think in terms of how AI will be deployed in the future, it'll need a lot of reskilling. I think that's an important piece that a lot of people are, I feel, ignoring, because we had the same kind of issue when we went to like World 2.0 with mechanized like manufacturing and all of that. A lot of people had to reskill themselves. Then we went to the computer age. You had to reskill yourself because computers were doing a lot of the job. And now it's even more automation. So, I spend a lot of my time thinking about what's the impact of AI. I'm a big believer in it. I actually deploy AI, and we're seeing all of that value across the student journey. But at the same time, people always ask me the question, Ashish, you're running an AI company. Are you taking people out of jobs? Like, that's a serious question I get all the time. And I say, no, it kind of depends. In some cases, we've had deployments where they've had to hire 50 more people because there's so much more data, so many more students, so many more things to do. So it's been a very interesting journey, and I think if we talk in 6 months, we're going to have a whole new perspective again.
I quite agree. I mean, and you mentioned the GSV, or the ASU and GSV summit that I recently attended in San Diego. Yes, it was all about AI, and it progressed to become even more obsessed with it than it did 12 months ago. I don't know where we are in the Gartner hype curve on AI at the moment, but I think we've still got a trough of disillusionment in front of us as we come off of a peak. But I'm absolutely sure that there's going to be a plateau of reasonable investment somewhere there in the future. And as I'm sure any Gartner curve user would advocate, there's no shortcut really to working your way through that curve and working your way to the prosperous, long-term, hopefully progressive productivity improvements that technologies can bring and have been shown to bring to all sorts of situations. I think that's how we should be looking at it.
Do you think we're close to the plateau on the Gartner curve, or we're still climbing?
I think we're about to plunge into the valley of disillusionment, to be honest. I think we're approaching the top, if not at the top, of the overhyping of AI. I think that's what I just got 3 days and multiple sessions with 10,000 people about, and the sort of reactions that people gave to what was being said. We're still intrigued by it, but we don't fully understand it, and some of the promises of it will be beyond what turns out to be a realistic, and we'll probably get some disinvestment and some reactions and some backlash and some some dismissing of the technology happening in the months and years ahead. I think we should expect to come through that, and expect that education generally, and higher education in particular, has got some realistic levels of new models of investment and engagement and business operation that will be absolutely dependent upon AI in the medium term.
Yeah, love it. Talking about GSV, you were also there for your book signings. And you've written that with a couple of amazing leaders of institutions, online institutions in the US. Talk to us a little bit about the book and what you would want our listeners to know about the book.
Well, first of all, you've already revealed the title of the book, because the strapline of my LinkedIn profile is called Changing Higher Education for Good, and that is the title of the book. You described it as simple and neat, or something like that. That's why I use it, and I think it's a mission and it's a purpose that applies to everything that I'm trying to do. So the book's called Changing Higher Education for Good, and it comes out of, I love podcasts. Thank you for having me on yours, Ashish. This was written from the second 50 of the now 115 people I've had on my HEDx podcast. I co-wrote little op-eds with all of those 50 people. They include people like Paul LeBlanc of Southern New Hampshire and Scott Pulsifer of Western Governors University that I know are people that you admire too. They include people like Ann Kirshner of Hunter College in City University, New York, but they also include CEOs of edtech companies around the world, innovators and people involved in startups. And the conversations were really about how people were seeing the future of higher education and the impact that technology would have, and how we would achieve greater equity by having a concentrated focus on innovation in this sector. So the coming to ASU GSV was really a great opportunity for me to give copies of books that we've co-written to Paul, to Scott, to Anne, and to many of the other 50 co-authors of that book. I came to ASU GSV from Australia the wrong way around the world, if you like, via the UK, and spent time in I did. I went to visit my mother in the UK, but also took the chance to visit people in Queen's University, Belfast, Aston University, where I'm a visiting professor, and the place where I did my PhD, actually, in London South Bank University, and met with leaders in all those places to share the book with them too. So the book sets out an agenda for how we can, if you like, work through that overhyping of some of the technology, that recovering from some of the disillusionment that will follow, and to reach through really having a laser focus on best practice examples of use of technology from universities around the world and from other sectors, how we can best apply technology to change higher education for good.
Love it. Love it. I missed meeting you. I would have taken a copy from you at GSV, but where can people get this book from?
Well, if you visit my HEDx website at www.hedx.com.au, you'll find a headline reference to a new book on there. It takes you straight to an order form, and you can order that also through Amazon and normal book channels, Booktopia and others. So if you search Changing Higher Education for Good, it should take you somewhere to details of that book, but you can also find it on the HEDx website.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to read it. I'm going to urge our listeners to also read it, because, I mean, if people like Paul LeBlanc of Southern New Hampshire and Scott Pulsifer of Western Governors and all of these folks are, have played some part in that book, I mean, they really believe in what you're doing. They believe in your work, and they've agreed to be a part of that. So this is fantastic, Martin.
Ashish, I got a lovely story from the summit about those two people, because I gave copies of the book to each of them at that book signing at the GSV summit. And I've joked with each of them in interviewing them separately and in the writings for the chapters of the book as to, so who has got the biggest online university in the world? Is it Southern New Hampshire, or is it Western Governors University? And they both very modestly say they're not sure, and that they don't mind, because there's such a large unmet demand for future education that it's not who's the biggest that matters, but just that they each do as much as they can. And we had a lovely setting with a photograph that's on my LinkedIn profile, and I think both of theirs as well, of them standing back to back and me standing behind them trying to measure who was the tallest. I declared it a tie, and I think they have about the same number of students each. It oscillates every enrollment time. But the point I'd make about both of them is that the analogy of each of us really seek to stand on the shoulders of giants, and do so when we make our own contributions of the world. Those two individuals are giants of the innovation in online education space. They're giants in the area of transforming education with the use of technology to the benefit of many greater numbers of students and lifelong learners who otherwise would not get that opportunity. And each of us, I think, should take the opportunity to learn from innovators like Paul and Scott and to apply our own innovation to add to what the world knows from what those two institutions, leaders and their teams have achieved, alongside many others that are documented in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been an admirer of all of them. Michael Crow, just amazing, amazing how they've built their institutions. And also, I mean, the strata of society that they serve, the middle to low income adult learner, very impactful in terms of what they do for the economy.
You mentioned Michael Crow. He's a great friend of mine, and he was a speaker at our recent HEDx conference in Melbourne 5 or 6 weeks ago. He admired the shirt I was wearing at the time at the conference, and I publicly declared that I'd be bringing him one to San Diego to thank him for providing for my conference. I presented that shirt, that very, very interesting shirt, to him at San Diego, and I look forward to the occasion when he wears it. But I think I'm going to leave that as a surprise for you to uncover and your listeners to uncover, Ashish, when Michael eventually puts it on. But my giving a gift to him is really an analogy for the gift that he and others are giving, because you're quite right to call Michael out as an equally important, if not even greater, pioneer in this online education space and the democratization of higher education. I in my frequent visits to the United States, often am drawn to the story of the Starbucks academic partnership with ASU, if you're familiar with it, where there have now been 12,000 Starbucks employees who've benefited and graduated from free, I'll emphasize that, online education at ASU by virtue of being a Starbucks employee at a time when student debt and the cost of education is getting out of hand for everybody, and the fact that so much of that 12,000 plus graduating student cohort have been typically 31-year-old single mothers of three trying to recover their paths in life from unfortunate starts, rather than 17-year-olds trying to get into prestigious institutions with backings of parents in ways that perpetuate privilege and perpetuate the advantage that comes from wealth and from admission to exclusive universities. I think we will always have prestigious exclusive universities, but I look forward to more examples of employees of Starbucks and Walmart and other large employing organizations being in partnerships enabled with technology by pioneering universities like ASU, SNHU, WGU and others, and us truly changing higher education for good, where more people like my sister can get a life-changing education, and not just people that were streamed at the age of 11 for whatever reason to be on the fast track for that advantage.
Martin, that's a powerful statement, and it shows it actually comes from deep within your heart. I can feel it. And I thank you for everything you're doing, especially bringing leaders together, getting their voice out with HEDx and everything you're doing. Fantastic job. Fantastic job. And I'm so happy you said yes with your schedule at GSV and everything, and being in America gets a little crazy here at times.
Well, my thanks to you, Ashish. I mean, I know how much work goes into putting on podcasts and reaching out to people and working up and producing these sorts of means of really important ways of spreading messages. So I've had enough people say yes to coming onto my podcast. How could I refuse an innovator like you with a beautiful podcast like the one that you run? The chance to complement and collaborate with the efforts that you're making to shine a light on how technology is such a powerful cause for advancing, not only enrollments and admissions and marketing education in higher education, but the broader mission of what we're all seeking to do. So my hats off to you, my commendation to you for your podcast, and my thanks for being a small part of the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much, Martin. This has been great. And only one important question. Are you going back to Australia the wrong way or the right way?
I wouldn't want to be arrogant, but I think there's only one way to go to Australia, and that's the right way. And but I have to say that learning, the note I'll finish on is that I'll always want to be in Australia, but I'll always want to stay connected to what's happening in innovative parts of the world. And clearly, the US is such a pioneer of innovative education. I'm really enjoying the connections that I'm building more deeply in the UK as well. And I'll look forward to many ways of connecting with the world from HEDx and connecting the world to HEDx. But my next trip is from San Francisco to Brisbane, Australia, and I look forward to getting home.
Fantastic. Well, good luck on your journey home, and Martin will definitely bump into each other at some point because we talk about similar things, we do similar things, and we are all here to grow education. So thank you so much.
I look forward to that, Ashish.